About as long as there's been motorcycles, the leather jacket has been part and parcel to the culture of a biker. And for 76 years, Portland's Langlitz Leathers have provided some of the finest leather garments that you can buy. Today, I'll be talking to Langlitz Leathers co-owner Bennie Goodson. You are listening to Do You Even Chopper? Hey, we're at Langlitz Leathers in Portland, Oregon with Bennie, and you're listening to Do You Even Chopper? Hey, Bennie, how's it going?
Good. Do you even chopper? I didn't even know the name.
Yeah.
That's good, man.
We talk about choppers and motorcycles, but I think today I want to talk about the things that go along with motorcycles, also about you and Langlitz in general, and kind of let people who might not know about Langlitz Leathers know about it. I assume that most people listening to this or read my magazine know about Langlitz, but that's an assumption that maybe is a safe one at this point.
Well, I think one of those things that I've noticed too, just working here over the years, is Langlitz is super famous and really not famous all at the same time, which is kind of fun, right? Because it puts us in a really cool space where we're not bombarded all the time. So if you kind of know, you know, and we can make you cool stuff. But not necessarily, I'm always surprised not necessarily everyone knows about us, which is nice. Not that I go around thinking, wow, everyone should know about Langlitz, because they don't.
Yeah.
It's a small company, and we don't spend a lot of time advertising. Most people know just word of mouth.
Yeah.
They see you wearing your jacket. They say, wow, that's a cool jacket. Who made that for you?
Sure.
And then you tell them, oh, Langlitz made it. You're usually our best advertisement. Just who's ever wearing the jacket at that time is the best advertisement for us, really.
I see Langlitz a lot pop up in Japanese media, and you
Very
have a
much
really
so.
strong connection with Langlitz Leathers in Japan.
Yes.
How long has that relationship been going on?
That's been going on since the late 80s, basically. That's kind of a funny story. Like Takanori Akamoto came here, and we used to close down 2 weeks in the summer in July. And the first time he came here, he used to come to America to pick vintage clothes, and he wanted to come to Langlitz to get a few jackets, and we were closed.
Oh.
And he came back the next summer. Same time. And we were closed. So he came back a third year when he figured out the hours.
Yeah.
And from him, we started selling jackets, and he basically went back to Japan and started carrying more, and he was so enamored with the story of Ross Langlitz. He had other vintage stores. He had a store called Mom and Pop, and it carried a lot of different vintage clothes from America that he picked. But he loved Langlitz stuff and then started creating a network of dealers, and he created 2 Langlitz-only stores. He has a store in Nagoya and a store in Tokyo. And within those 2 standalone stores, there's a dealer network of about 27 dealers throughout the country.
Oh, wow.
Now, all those other dealers may sell other jackets, like, could be whatever, Vanson, who knows,
Lewis.
A lot of Lewis leathers, but those, you go in there, you can get measured up for Langlitz, just like you would get measured up here. They'll take your order. They'll submit it to the main store in Nagoya, and then Nagoya will submit the orders to us. We make everything here, then ship back to Japan.
How big has that been as far as part of your kind of business model over the last several years?
It's a big part of the business. I would say maybe like 35%, It could be very close. It's good, to 40 maybe. It's not quite half, but it's a very large chunk of business.
So Langlitz has like a classic style. Maybe we should just say how Langlitz started with Ross and how that kind of classic style was born.
For sure. So Ross Langlitz, he lost his leg when he was 16 years old in a motorcycle accident, which kept him out of World War II. He didn't go to the war, so he was working in a glove factory, and he started working with goat hide leather and different leathers, and he started realizing that most of the jackets he had at the time, he was an avid motorcycle rider. He would buy, back then, even Sears sold really nice leather jackets. You had Hercules brands, different brands like that. They were all made in the USA.
Yeah.
Pretty good leather jackets, but not quite designed for motorcycle riding. So he started taking jackets apart and started making jackets, and realized he liked a shorter front length for when he was setting on his bike and longer sleeve length for reaching his arms out.
Yeah.
And maybe possibly bi-swings. And then riding in the Northwest, he realized he liked the offset zipper a lot, because with the offset zipper, he had the lapels that would keep him warm in the rain.
Yeah.
So he did that with the Cascade and stuff like that. He was a Harley mechanic, and at night, when he stopped wrenching on Harleys, he would sew in the basement at the Harley shop at Eastside Harley Davidson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he just kind of like, you guys are the best customers as far as like you being representatives and people seeing the jacket wearing it. He started making jackets for his friends, and people would see his friends wearing them, and then they're like, where did you get that jacket? Yeah. And so they started hitting him up. So then he opened up his first location on Morrison Street, and it was called Speedway Togs in 1947.
Oh, wow.
It was called Speedway Togs in 47, 48, and 49 by the Leather Garment Shop. In 1950, he wanted to kind of maybe have the name a little more known. So he named it Langlitz Leathers in 1950. But like those jackets are 47, 48, 49. Those are all Speedway Togs, and then it will change to 1950. So those are original jackets from 1947.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, he really got into racing. And a lot of the Langlitz jackets are, the iconic ones are essentially race leathers.
Yeah.
How did it progress to becoming also kind of fashionable? Because you see people wearing Langlitz who probably have never touched a motorcycle as well, but there's elements of a Langlitz jacket that maybe don't make the most sense off of a motorcycle.
Yeah, I think just musicians and different things started wearing them, and like most things, if it's hard to get, it seems cooler to get to, because if they know that not 500 more people are going to have the exact same thing on, it kind of became real popular with a lot of musicians and movie actors and different things like that, just because they look so different than most things, I think.
Yeah. Again, like going back to like business and how much of it is, how much of your business is motorcycle enthusiasts and how much is probably people looking for just a high quality leather fashion jacket?
Oh man, rider-wise, I would say is probably like 60% of the business, so depends. And then if you count the chunk of Japanese business, you're pushing more 80, 90. I would say the fashion and music and things like that, or just lifestyle leathers, is more like maybe 10, 15%, like a smaller side of it.
So it's pretty small.
It's pretty small. Like most of the people that are still getting jackets to this day are getting them for riding. Yeah. Or, I mean, just like the guy that was in here right now, he's like, I don't ride. And I'm like, well, you don't have to ride to get a jacket, a cool leather jacket that fits you good. Like, I have tons of friends that like a nice leather jacket.
Yeah. But you ride. Does most of the people here ride as well? Or
No, like I'm probably one of the only riders here. My office guy, Scott, rides. And John, one of the older core workers here, he used to ride, but not as much anymore. None of the seamstresses ride right now.
Oh, wow. But you ride in almost every day, it looks like.
Yeah. Either I'm riding in or coming in with the dog, so I might be driving the old truck or something.
Yeah. Let's talk about maybe briefly some of the because we're talking about the fashion and some of the non kind of riding endeavors Langlitz has done. I've seen a lot of hunting gear, like gear gags and things like that. I think that's quite interesting for Northwest specifically.
Yeah, so Ross Langlitz was an avid trap shooter too. So he made a gun vest, and when we were coming up on our 75th anniversary, I wanted to re-release the gun vest. And then I do a lot of trap shooting and duck hunting and different things like that. So it just kind of fit naturally. It was just like, oh, well, Ross was already making this stuff, and I saw his gun vest, and I wanted to create it so I could wear one too,
I think that ties into what I think is probably the biggest question I have for you is how much of like the thought process of Langlitz now is tied into the story of Langlitz and the legacy of Langlitz and kind of maintaining that going forward?
So much of it is. I mean, so they used to sell, like in that same thing, Rush sold trap shooting supplies out of the store. So Langlitz made leather jackets, but also you could buy shotgun shells and gun bags and different things here. So up until like 1978, it was also a gun supply store, So he was actually selling shooting supplies out of the store with leather jackets because he loved shooting so much. He was a fisherman too, and avid outdoor guy. I think as far as legacy and as far as steering the ship, I co-own it with Judy Langlitz, the granddaughter. So I think just kind of keeping that same preservation and kind of honoring the shop is big for me to kind of keep going to that same heritage and keep it going.
So it's on the third generation.
It's on the third generation now, yeah.
Yeah.
And then my hope is to get it to the 100th anniversary. You know, we just did our 75th, and hopefully I'll have people in place, and then they will have a good foundation set up for that afterwards, you know. But my goal is to make it to 100th anniversary, and then I'd like to step down. We'll see if I make it that far.
No, you never know.
You never know. You're not guaranteed anything. And you're not guaranteed tomorrow, and you should always, you know.
Well, and you kind of learned that the rough way in the last year in that accident.
That was a bad accident. Yeah, no, definitely learned. Yeah, definitely saw I've had a few accidents, but that one definitely flashed. My eyes flashed, you know, like I thought, well, this could be it. Like when I knew I was hitting that car, I was like, this could be really bad.
How long did it take you to get back on a bike again? Because I remember last fall you still were having some mobility issues with
I
trying to
still
get back on.
I was using my cane yesterday. I still have to use my cane off and on. I did have my leather jacket on, so I ended up with zero road rash on my upper body. But I was wearing business pants on the bottom, so my leg got pretty tore up.
That's like the perfect advertisement unintentionally. It's like wearing the leather all perfectly fine.
I had zero marks on that upper body. Nothing wrong at all. And even if I had leather pants on, that impact from the car probably would have shattered my leg in the way it did. I've gone down in leather pants on a previous accident a long time ago. Not that I make a big habit of this, but it slid pretty far in our pants, so I've tested those out too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we've tested like Kevlar denims and stuff. Yeah. We did a Kevlar denim vest and a couple other materials, but they're good materials, but they're not the same. Like they don't allow you to slide safely at all, and they don't pad you in the same way.
And sometimes they're grabby, which I know sends you into a tumble. I did a lot of road racing, and just even being in the leathers and sliding down the track on a racetrack, you know, sometimes if you're wearing stuff that's grabby, it sends you into a tumble and a roll, and that's when you get hurt. Because if you can stay on your side and sliding, as long as you're not hitting something, a curb, a telephone pole, and everything else, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
But it's when you hit those impact moments is the problem, you know. And I've seen people in cheap leather jackets that come in, not cheap leather jackets, I would say, but just cheap material, like whether it be, I don't want to name names or anything, but just where the seams just bust apart. And they're like, well, I had hard armor and all the armor fell out. And it was like, yeah, because this thing was sold up for like $50 somewhere, you know.
Let's talk about material for a second, because I think that's something that you instantly know the difference in quality with a Langlitz and then kind of a off the rack. So you pretty much do either cow or goat, right? You don't use any genuine leather, and maybe people don't understand what genuine leather is not genuine leather.
No. They may use a percentage of leather.
Yeah. So how does that kind of, when you're riding, how do those materials react to skidding compared to something that might be particle pressed together in qualled leather?
Well, you're not going to burn through it, right? It's going to stay together. It's going to say, well, you will get some roughing, and you can tear the top finish off of a jacket sometimes, but that's just the top finish. You're still not going to get through the raw material or the thickness. You're only going to tear off the tannis leather up top.
Okay.
So it's always going to be a lot tougher and stronger. And we pick out, like most of the stuff that we don't choose is stuff that other companies would love to choose. When we build a custom jacket, I start looking at all the side panels and the patterns and figuring out what's going to fit this person's arm the best. Okay, his chest is this big, and I start looking at the hide. The guys are looking at the hides, and we're saying, okay, let's choose this. The grain's running this way. We spend a lot of time just picking out each piece, you know, because we're not stamping stuff out. If you go to a lot of places, they have 50 pieces of leather stacked up on a table, and a huge clicker comes down and just clicks out like 70 sleeves at a time. Now those get pieced out to different jackets, whereas your jacket came from the same hide or two. You know, it's all looks the same. Sometimes before I started working here, I would order a jacket and sometimes wonder why the left panel looked so different from the right panel. It was later years that I realized that that's why it happened, because they did piecework.
Huh. So, I'm just fascinated about the idea of skidding, and maybe this is boring to the listeners, but I think back of like the height of cool leather jackets, and I think of like the English rockers, right? And they're probably wearing Lewis leathers or something like that.
Yeah.
But they use the studs, and the like thought process was, well, the studs will let me slide farther on the road or easier. Was that ever something that like people will say, can you stud up a jacket, and how do you kind of talk to them about that?
I talk to them like this, the same way I talk to people about sewing on patches on a jacket. We love our jackets so much, and we think they're so beautiful the way they are, that it's kind of like putting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. Like, we don't want to touch our jackets. Like, not so much just for like resale of a jacket, because obviously it's easier to resell a jacket that doesn't have certain patches that might appeal to one person to appeal to another, or studs. And I don't like pinholes. I get a lot of guys that they love a certain motorcycle brand, whether it be Moto Guzzi or whatever, Harley Davidson, that, and they come in and they have a lot of pins in their jacket, and then they get to a different point in their life, and they're like, well, I took all these pins out. Can you guys fix these pinholes? And it's like, those pinholes are kind of there now. They're there now, you know?
You can't sew them out.
It's an interesting about what you say about those studs, though, and I imagine they will do that. I had a chain wallet that helped me slide pretty far one time, but the 2 snaps did not feel good. They left some indentions in my butt. I'm like, I bet they would slide good, but you know what doesn't feel good? Is those studs getting dug into you.
Yeah, I had talked to a guy who, he's in a fraternal society that I'm a part of, and he used to ride motorcycles, and he wore studs, and he was like, well, it was so you could slide, and it's a wild concept.
Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't work. It'd be no different than like a knee puck sliding down a racetrack, a hard material. You're wearing a knee puck, and when you lean over, that hard material does slide, and it doesn't grab. So I've had
twill jeans that I used to wear, like stay press and twill jeans.
Yeah,
and going down, and then it turns into a plastic knee puck on its own.
Did it get hot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, it got real hot and started burning.
Yeah, it sticks to your skin.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not good. But then when you're done, you have like this plastic cap.
Yeah.
Then
it's hard.
Then there's safety.
You seasoned it.
Let's talk. I mean, so you're in Portland.
Yeah.
We're in Olympia. Last year you introduced the Death's Head Cascade jacket. Let's maybe talk about the history of what that is.
Yeah.
And maybe just the general love of kind of wild racing that Ross had.
Yeah, so that was an interesting race. When I first started working here, I would start seeing pictures like on the refrigerator, just those black and white photos of Red Rice wearing a Death Head jacket.
Yeah.
And it kind of turned into a mystery for me, right? Like, I wanted to figure out, what was this Death Head jacket? What was this Death Head Cascade? What was this Death Head race? And it was really hard to find out information. If you Google it on the computer, a few things would pop up. It's a race in Washington. Olympia Motorcycle Club put it on at the time. We did a big display. We ended up finding a lot of information. Gentry Dayton, my good friend, he hit up some guys that ran a museum in Washington, and they actually had the original trophy that Red Rice is holding up in that picture. And the more I found out about the race, the more I just fell in love with it, just the whole thing. It was still like, the race was a figure-8 track with a wooden bridge, and they're jumping old war bikes from the 40s and 50s, and it's just, it's insane, right? And it's the coolest thing.
Figure-8 with the bridge.
Yeah, figure-8 with the bridge.
So are they going under and over?
Yeah, under. Oh, okay. Some people would go under while people would be going over the top of it and ramping the bridge.
That's insane.
It got changed all the time, but it was not just a figure-8. Sometimes the course would get bigger and come back through, but it always went under the bridge and over the bridge. And the bikes they rode and just the jackets that Ross made for all those guys back then, just cool.
Yeah.
Just cool stuff.
They like died in the 50s, right?
Yeah. I think 1952 was the last race I was going to want to say right offhand. I think it started in 1937. And Red Rice run it like 4 years. A bunch of Ross's friends won it. Ross was in it a few times. He never won it, though.
Yeah.
It's a hard race to win. It's one of those things that's, a lot of guys are crashing, you know? It's a very old race.
And just to make it clear for everyone, Ross is racing with one leg.
Yes.
And he continued to race for a long time.
With a very bad prosthesis.
Yeah.
Not like a prosthesis today. Oh, basically a wooden heavy leg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on his right leg would have been a large wooden leg. He had a name for it. Its name was Jake. Yeah.
And then he customized his bikes to...
Yeah. He did brake and shifting with his left leg, which worked well for him a lot of times, and also with his good leg on flat track going left, he could anchor in the bad leg and put out his good leg and turn left because his good leg could get out.
Yeah.
And this would anchor in, so he'd be good.
I've heard some telltales of him losing his leg on the track as a laugh and trying to...
Oh, yeah. He would get tangled up. And sometimes they would get tangled up and a racer would get real close to him or something and he might just kick his leg off just to freak out the crowd. Like he would play jokes like that all the time.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, I mean, people would freak out.
Yeah.
There's been stories that I've heard where people actually threw up, like thought it was so real. Like people are like throwing up in the stands. Like it could have been all the 5-cent beers they were drinking too. Who knows?
Let's talk about your love of motorcycles. How did you kind of discover motorcycles and maybe what that has brought you kind of in life?
So for me, which is crazy, I'm 50 years old. My whole life has been, I've made a living off motorcycles my entire life, except for when I was in the military. Bar that, and even when I got out of the military, I knew the first thing I was doing was going to go to motorcycle school because I wanted to get a job wrenching. So I was just like, this is what I'm doing. But when I first learned about motorcycles, like most kids, we had mini bikes. I was young. But there was a kid down the street from me about 1.5 miles, and we all rode BMX together. And he was a pretty cool kid. Like, he had a big quarter pipe at the time.
Oh, wow.
And he had a KX80. And we would try to air this KX80 back in the 80s off that quarter pipe all the time. And we would just wreck it and just shoot it to the moon like crazy. But to me, I was hooked after that. That KX80 and just trying to hit that quarter pipe and throw it in the air and try to come back in because we would do it on our BMX bikes. And we were like, oh, we can do this, So, and we would just race those things around the field like crazy. I started street riding. My friend had a Honda Interceptor, and then I got a Honda Nighthawk after that, like a 550 when I was about 15. You could legally ride motorcycles I grew up in Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
So you could get your motorcycles permit when you're 14. So it was pretty cool. Like when we were all 14, we would be riding motorcycles, and if you rode a motorcycle at 14, you felt like a pretty cool kid. You were like, dude, we ride motorcycles on the street. People don't even have their license yet. Yeah. We're riding motorcycles. This is the best. I had a girlfriend in Texas, and she lived in Houston. And so I lived in Little Rock, which is about a 5-hour drive, maybe 6, 7, So I would ride my motorcycle to her place on the weekends and different things like that when I was about 18 or 19. So I started traveling. I started hitting the road a lot and just kind of, even then, I just had a tape player. It was a cassette player, like a Sony Walkman or something, have something in my helmet, and I just started traveling a lot on my bike. I didn't have a lot of money. I come from a very poor family, very poor means, but I had shitty street bikes and I still made do, and I always had enough cash to put some gas in there and just kind of figure things out. And I started traveling, and I just loved being on the road and seeing things and traveling like that. And the bikes progressed over time. I figured out I was good at building things. I moved to Portland. I got a job with Kenny Dreer doing vintage rebuilds, and we worked on Triumphs and Nortons and old British bikes. We acquired the Norton trademark, which they sold that to Stuart Garner, who owns Norton now.
Yeah.
And we built basically the modern Norton that you see Stuart building with the company now. And then just started building and just loved making them too.
Yeah.
I love the whole process. When I was working with Kenny, I learned to machine a lot and weld and different things. And getting to learn how to use a lathe and just all that stuff and really fabricating your own parts, that was really cool to me. So I just always in love with it. Later, the whole process of making them came into play. But yeah, like most people,
Portland was a British bike town at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Through
big
and through.
Time. Big time.
It really... My observation as an outsider, although I've been hanging out in Portland since the early 90s, has always been there was a big transition in the early 2000s away from the British bikes toward Harley finally.
I think so too.
Before that, it seemed like Portland was like British bike
It's
central.
almost anti-Harley Town for a little
exactly.
while. Like, everybody loved Triumphs and Nortons and different things, you know.
So that transition kind of oddly, coincidentally, was those early years of One Moto too.
Yes.
The early years of One Moto is BSA,
You almost
Norton,
never saw a
Triumph.
Harley there.
Almost never see a
No,
Harley.
a few guys, you know. Yeah.
And
I mean, there was still definitely a presence like any other town. Like, there's definitely a presence for old Harleys, but yeah, I don't think you're right. Like, the younger crowd wasn't as predominant in.
I mean, the club crowd was Harleys.
For sure. 100%.
And that was, like, back then was an older club crowd, and Portland has some of the few clubs that are chopper only Harley clubs too.
Yes.
Which is kind of unique. And this might be a different, like, side tangent from Langlitz, but it's kind of the ecosystem you're in. Did you see changes in the style of jackets you were selling at the height of the younger guys, like doing kind of British bikes or even cafe racers, and then when they got into Harleys and choppers? Or
You know, not really for us, because our jackets are such the same style. We've never changed the style. Langlitz has never been a company that has gone with what the latest trend is. Ross did a really good job on designing these jackets in the 40s and 50s, and we just make the same jacket we've always made. Now, you can definitely say, oh, well, we sometimes go for a style, but that's more of the customers will go with the style, because they'll go, if you look at some of the jackets from the 70s where they might be different patches and different things, or the way they had to sew things on.
what about the collars? I mean, it seems like
They used to be a little more pointier, you know. They've definitely trimmed down a little bit. But a lot of people, they'll say, oh, I want that cafe racer jacket. But what they really mean is they want a Cossack collar on their leather jacket. And I'm like, well, you can get a Cossack collar on any of our jackets, whether it's a Timberline, a Cascade, or a Columbia. Because they'll come in, and a lot of times they see a Columbia and they go, I want the cafe racer one, which I think most of the time they're trying to talk about a Cascade. But you can make a Columbia with a Cossack collar, and then it changes the whole look.
Also maybe a center zip instead of offset? Or
No, I don't even think it's so much the offset zipper that throws them off. They just think short collar, and they mainly see the Columbia with a dress collar, and they don't realize you can get it with a short collar too.
Yeah, I think that probably answers the thought. There.
That would be the only thing as far as style goes that I think, you know.
How has the kind of age demographic shifted over the years for y'all?
It's always, it's kind of sad sometimes, you know, because you see it every year, a few years, like you get a run of just really old time riders, and I feel honored to get to meet them and hear their stories, because they come in and all these jackets get recycled, you know. They come back in, I'm 78, I can barely walk, I got to sell my jacket, I can't ride anymore, you know. And you'll get a rush of them, and then you think, man, I wonder how many more people. And then, you know, another 5 years goes by, and this next group of guys brings in a few jackets, and like, I got to sell my jacket, I just can't walk, or I can't, you know, I'm sick, or this or that, you know. Which is kind of sad, because you hear every story under the moon, but it's cool that the jackets come back, and someone else buys that jacket and they wear it, whether it be a younger kid or not. The next generation is going to get that same jacket, and it's already cool. It's broken in. It looks, someone's wore it for 50 years. Nothing beats that, like a cool old leather jacket. A younger kid can get it for a better price than a new one, maybe. So I like that part of it. But you definitely see the generations die down too, you know. As far as younger ones, I feel like the younger market's starting to, you know, like it. It's starting to peak a little bit. Yeah.
I always, the one thing is, the first thing that I'll tell people about the Ton magazine is, like, we're not an industry magazine. Like, we're definitely like a chopper magazine in that regard. But it's interesting to see young people, you know, they want to get, first they get kind of the, what is it? Armored. Armored flannel shirts and everything, and then they kind of, it's like, well, that's not protecting me, and then they kind of go to the next level, and then eventually they get a leather jacket, and it's kind of a process I've observed by a lot of people time and time again.
Yeah,
it's
I've definitely seen that too. Yeah,
I mean, to each their own. I think everyone should ride what they think is super comfortable. So
100%. I think too. Yeah, you see. Some people will see a jacket and they'll say, oh, well, That's not for me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's for this customer.
Yeah.
That's their dream. It might not be my dream. It might not be your dream.
Yeah.
But that's their dream. That's exactly what they wanted. And we built them exactly what they wanted. And that's cool. Because what other company is going to take the time to do, I want yellow this or that. I want all this different stuff. Just like that jacket that guy, I don't know if you saw his jacket that he walked out with, but it was, a raspberry rough out jacket. Like, yeah, that's not for me. That's cool. But it's for him and he loves it. That's all that matters, And no, a lot of companies, if you called them up and said, hey, could you build me this? They're going to say no, right? They're not going to take the chance on building that. And why? Because they're only worried. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like everyone wants to make money. I want to make money, of course, but like our main job is to make people happy. And that's what we don't want to sacrifice for anything.
Yeah.
And so we'll take these chances and make wild jackets. If it doesn't work out, we'll sell it on the used rack. Eventually it'll sell. Of course, but I think just the bottom line isn't our main focus. Like quality is our main focus, and like making people stoked is our focus. Like all that other stuff just comes with it. You'll make some money on the side when you can. It'll all come around. But it's not our focus. I mean, this is not a business model for. This is like the worst possible business model.
It's kind of a shock that it's lasted 75 years. It's basically only due to high quality, good customer service.
Yes.
Sticking to what you're good at.
And not only has it been around for 75 years, people were trusting to build these jackets through the mail for so long. Yeah. If you go into the back warehouse, there's 50 years worth of handwritten letters, just people corresponding. Hey, I'd like this kind of jacket. No internet, no nothing. Just people drawing sketches on napkins, sending them to Ross, and him building the jacket of their dreams, So
you've ventured outside of just jackets a little. You've done some collaborations, but like very, very few. Like the helmet liners for Joe King.
Yeah, of course.
And others. How does that kind of factor into decision making? Is that somewhat of a distraction, or is it kind of just add to the greater awareness of your goods? Or
it can add to the greater awareness, of course. Some of those collaborations are great. Some of them are really hard as far as deciding on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Typically, in the past, we were a company that didn't really collaborate that much. And of course, being an older company, we get approached a lot because everyone kind of wants to collaborate with us. And I'm not just saying that to try to toot my own horn or anything. It's just people know we've been around for a long time, and maybe that adds a little more credibility to their brand, or if they're a newer company. So it's hard to make decisions. Usually it's just made because people are friends and I've got to know them, like Mike or someone else. Paulo, Joe King's a great guy. My friends, just people that I know probably is mainly... more,
and it's more of a recent phenomenon too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's not to say if the right one came along, but it's definitely a decision that I don't take lightly. And the reason it ends up being people that I'm friends with probably is because I know those people and I trust them.
Yeah.
Because I've known them for a long time. And if I get to know other people that present me with a super cool ideal, and I like a collaboration to be like both people bringing something to the table. So many times they call it a collaboration. Well, it's not a collaboration if I do all the work and then you put your label on it. That's not a collaboration. Paulo, Joe King, perfect example. That's a collaboration. My leather, his helmet, me doing this, him doing that. That's a real collaboration.
Yeah. And I think it's one that is a good example of both brands having their own following.
Oh yeah,
their own icon, like kind of iconography around it, coming together.
Yeah,
like opening up a market for both people in places that they may not have kind of seen. Or
100%. He has a lot of eyes on him that I don't have on me too, and then I probably have a little bit that he doesn't have too, like just my Japan market, different market, things like that. So it's definitely good for both people.
Yeah, and really for people listening, those collab helmets are excellent. Having one,
they're pretty fun.
They're pretty good, but
if you can get your hands on one.
Yeah, they were pretty small.
Very small numbers.
Yeah. I want to talk about something that may be like extremely tangential, is that you're a skater.
Yeah.
Portland has a skate town. Burnside's one of the most famous skate spots in the country.
Yeah, that's why I moved here.
Well, that might be the answer there in some ways. But how has skating kind of informed your approach to motorcycles and just living? I find that a lot of people who are into motorcycles now, especially chopper scene, are ex-skaters.
Dude, it's funny. It's funny to watch that all develop over the years, and it has. It's I don't know how skateboarders get. I guess I do know how skateboarders get tied into motorcycling, because we're always kind of vagabonds in the first place. Like, we were always jumping in vans. We were always riding to skate spots and doing different things. And it seems like a lot of skateboarders do get into the chopper scene and different things. I think a lot of it is we have that skater's eye. And the skater's eye is always looking at things, everything a little bit differently, right? Yeah. We're looking at like, oh, there's a crack in that sidewalk, or oh, there's this, or there's that. Oh, I could skate that. Yeah. We're looking at all the landscape, like when you ride a dirt bike, like, oh, I can air this, I can do this. I always thought when I started road racing, that skateboarding eye helped me go faster on the racetrack, because I could see, I just felt like I saw through the lines, like carving through a park at Burnside. Like, okay, I'm racing, I see these guys, it's just like me flowing through a park and skating. And if a guy that skates can go race a motorcycle, he's naturally turns into a pretty talented motorcycle racer really quick. I don't know if it's the artistry of it. Skaters are just crazy artists, just what it is about how, I don't know, but you're right. Like, I never thought in my lifetime, because in the 80s it wasn't so much so. Like, we rode motorcycles a little bit, but probably because we just
There's a divide, too. There's a real divide.
Oh, for sure.
And maybe because you're from rural Arkansas. I'm from a rural area of the desert, but like most places, there's a divide between BMXers and off-roaders and skaters. Yeah. But in the kind of the rural setting, well, let's talk about the pandemic a bit. During the pandemic, when things closed down, you guys didn't stop, both here, but also you kind of went into a more artistic endeavor and made a short film.
Yeah.
Can you talk about The Passenger and how that kind of came about?
Definitely. So before The Passenger, actually even during a little bit, or the pandemic time, like I was, my friend Brad McLean, he does a lot of film. He's also a skater, professional skateboarder. Mm-hmm. So we would skate together, and him, Gentry, and I started doing a lot of film projects together. Just making small things for the shop, just having fun filming motorcycles and just kind of putting our spin on things. And we were having so much fun doing it. Gentry also has another friend, Jeff, on the East Coast, and they made a few videos together for a jacket, and we kind of realized, oh, this is what we want to do. Yeah. And when the pandemic happened, we were like, things shut down. We wanted to make a movie. We just started kind of making a movie about mental health and just awareness, and kind of a guy finding his way through the world and dealing with grief and sorrow and just different things. And we didn't want to make just a crazy biker movie. We kind of wanted to do our own twist on it, So we did that during the pandemic. We made the movie, and it was great. It was the funnest thing. It was one of the funnest experiences I ever been on. I hope to do more.
You started at the ocean and ended in the kind of the
Well, we started at the shop because his love interest would be working at the shop. But yeah, we started at the shop. We filmed here for 2 days. We worked our way up to the coast. We went all the way to Eastern Oregon. We went down to not Salton Sea. I was thinking of Palm Springs, but I can't think of it. What's the desert out there?
Oh,
Steen Mountains.
The Alabama mountains.
No, Steen Mountains. And what's the desert? Alford Desert.
Yeah, Alford.
Yeah, Alford. Yeah. So we ended up in Alford Desert.
Which, people I think don't understand how big Oregon really is. Wow. So you're talking from the beach to Alford, 6-hour drive.
Yeah, that's the most southern part of Oregon. It's more than 6 hours. I think it's 8 or 9 hours to get there. Yeah, it's a long way.
And then did you truck the bikes over the hills, or did you ride? Because there's scenes where you're making the trip, but
there was so much snow and bad weather and rain, and I had a Sprinter van because me and my son were racing motocross a lot at the time. I had sold that van, but I had it during that time, so we loaded the bikes up. And to really hit all the locations and spots we needed to.
Yeah.
We needed
yeah.
to be in a van. There's no way we could film the whole movie riding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty impossible.
It's too much logistically to get it done. We had to rent the cameras. You know, it's very expensive to rent all the cameras.
Yeah.
We rented very nice cameras. And
I heard that the pandemic actually kind of presented a bigger problem with the cameras, in that you were going to get hooked up with a deal with Leica, and then the rep couldn't make it.
Yep, he couldn't get into the country. He was supposed to actually fly in and everything else, and then they put everybody on lockdown. He couldn't fly in. We couldn't get the cameras here. Yeah.
So do you shoot them on Reds?
I think I'm not the super big camera guy, but I believe they're called like Black Magic.
Oh, it was a Black Magic.
Black Magic, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They looked really nice. Like I threw them over the rocks in the ocean, you know, like $10,000 camera.
Yeah. So that came out. You debuted it. Here in Portland.
And in Tokyo.
And then
recently
in
in
Olympia,
December.
And then Tokyo.
In Olympia too, yeah.
And you have plans on showing that more?
Yes. We want to show it with Paulo in Brazil coming up. We also want to do the Hookup motorcycle show in Wales. Yeah. And Taka is showing it at Joints in April. So he'll be showing it at the Joints motorcycle show in Nagoya.
You did multiple screenings in Japan during the kind of Yokohama, like Moon Eyes period, right? You did like 2 or 3.
We lined them up at the bookstore down there in Tokyo, and it was kind of nice because it was playing even after the Moon Eyes show. So a lot of the builders got to come after the Moon Eyes show and hang out. A lot of the brands and it actually was really nice because it was still a small setting, so it was a real cool setting to see the film in too. And got a lot of positive feedback, so that was nice to hear. You know, you're always kind of nervous to see what people are going to think of, because you're kind of putting your heart on the sleeve making a movie like that.
It's hard to show film to someone.
It's not for everybody, and that's fine too. You know, like, this is what we made, and this is what we like, and we're proud of it. And this is all that matters. Any
plans to do anything similar again? Not necessarily subject-wise, but to do another film project?
Nothing maybe to that scale, but like maybe to that scale. We're doing some small film projects right before the one motorcycle show. A week before that,
cool.
I've been scouting some secret locations that I've wanted to shoot for a while, and I've set up some car gimbals and different things that we're working with, because used to our filming was really sketchy, like guys with tied down my friends in the back of my Sprinter van, and like things flying around, and it's dangerous, right? Like, there's scenes where like my 16-year-old son is driving my Sprinter van up a mountain, and my motorcycle's inside the van almost on a door, you know. It's not good. So we invested a little bit of money.
You're like a step up from the wheelchair dolly.
Yes. We've got a milk crate in the back of the van, tied down people in there. So we bought a car gimbal and some different things where we can shoot things a little more safely, which is nice. But I've had this location that I go out with Gemma and hang out at all the time, and it's really just a beautiful area that I want to shoot in, and just for an excuse to go there and film cool motorcycle stuff, and maybe some shooting scenes with the gun vest and different things like that, you know?
Well, thanks for the time. I don't know how to wrap up podcasts. If people are listening to the first 2, they kind of understand that I'm not a podcast person. But at the same time, it's just about talking to people and kind of getting to know what they're doing. And I appreciate your time.
Super fun. Yeah, it was rad. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate
no problem. Do You Even Chopper podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, and other podcasting locations. You could also find us at thetunmag.com/podcast. If you'd like to subscribe and support the podcast, feel free to do so. It's not a hard sell, but every little dollar helps. We appreciate it greatly. The magazine itself is a quarterly print magazine published out of the Pacific Northwest, and you can find copies for sale and subscriptions at thetunmag.com/shop. We're on Instagram at the Tunmag, as well as Facebook, and you can find us on YouTube at the Tun Magazine. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.